And we're live. How you guys doing?
I'm doing fine.
Cass?
Doing great. Been too long.
Been a while. Yeah. We got a guest. Jay, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, folks. My name is Jay.
Just said before the stream, you're not gonna.
Hey! This can be anything. This can be anything.
It could be a prop.
Yeah.
Taser.
Taser. Hi, my name is Jay. I'm the chaotic element on the show today. I do other things too, I guess, but I don't know. I don't have intros. I don't go on other people's shows, and I don't have people on mine. So never have to come prepared for this.
That's right. Okay, well, we're back after a long hiatus. Podcast went on a little break due to the fact that I moved and new background, new setup. Ignore the boxes. I'm too lazy to unpack.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get rid of the shitty books you had, or are they still hanging around there?
No, I broke a bookcase on the move, and so I kind of had to make them stack into two.
So all the Carlyles went in the trash, right?
I only had one Carlyle book. It's on Defense Revolution, and I can't read it.
I don't know why you bought the biggest one. It's like massive.
It's this big. The font. There's no page numbers, and the
That
font
was
is this big.
size. Why would you do this to yourself?
Well, I thought it would look cool on the shelf until I realized it's an ugly printing.
So let me get this straight. You have one Star Wars book, one Carlyle book, and you haven't offed yourself yet.
No.
I think Carlyle would agree with me that Star Wars is the American epic, but I won't revive that discussion.
That's not a good thing though, Bulge. Like
You're
I know,
right,
in
but come on,
retrospect, that's not a good thing. I don't know why I said that. That puts my case.
Yeah.
In
Carlyle would agree with me. Yeah. You know who wouldn't agree with you? Jacques Maritain.
Speaking of
you know who wouldn't agree with that? Jesus. He wouldn't agree with that.
Well, I don't think our Lord and Savior gives any damns about any canon.
But he knows what the American epic is just by nature of his being. He knows. He'll correct me in the beatific vision. We'll finally find out.
I don't think you're getting it after asserting any of this.
I'll go to confession. It's fine.
You're okay. So when you close your eyes, you're going to wake up, but before the eternal darkness, you're going to see the face of Christ himself, reminding you of what you did before he kicks you down into the eternal darkness.
And then I'll understand I deserve it. It's fine.
I feel like we do have an obligation on All Saints Day. We need to help get Bulge into heaven because he's not on the right track right now.
Yeah. It feels like when the church was giving Luther all those chances to recant what he said, and he refused. Like we're giving you the opportunity to correct your path right now. You can turn away from it.
I'll talk to the priest. We'll hold a council at Worms. We'll discuss this. I'll nail some theses to the door of the Brazilian parish, and they'll be very confused about references to Star Wars in America.
Bulge just nailing Star Wars fan fiction to the cathedral.
And just to just clarify something categorical, how can a movie end up in the canon? Like it's literature, unless you're talking about the extended universe. But who gives a shit about extended universe books if you've ever been within 5 feet of a woman?
I'm clearly talking about the novelizations of each of the movies that went on concurrently with them.
Why? Have you ever felt the loving touch of a woman before?
Yes.
Then how are you in this position?
Well, I don't know, Jay. It's a mystery to me.
This is going to be a fun time.
Anyway,
repent.
The real heretic, Luther.
Repent. A decade of the rosary tonight for all of this.
I do that every night. It's fine. We're good. We're good to go.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Matthew.
I need to move my camera.
We know the Einkauf. It's fine, Matthew.
What the hell just happened to my camera? There we go. Let me move that so I can actually see the super chats. There we go.
Should I sum up for the viewers where we left off?
Yes. Let me just say the screen real quick so we can.
For us, where we left off, it's been
been a while.
And we bounced around so much, man. We jumped from like Lusso to Descartes to Rousseau. I remember we left off on Lusso. I think it was page 7.
Yeah, you said page 7.
Yeah.
From what I remember.
Okay, here we go.
So, where we left off is basically Luther just left the church, is what essentially happened. Before this was a character study, specifically of Luther's life as a religious Catholic and the, this drama of his soul at this point. This is a continuation of that, of, of his internal struggle and of his essentially giving in to despair, as Maritain characterizes it. And just at the moment where he decides to abandon the church. And before we continue on and read, I'm actually curious as to what Jay's first impressions were, because he did read a bit of this before coming onto the show.
Yes, and this was maybe 2 months ago. I have not picked it up since. But,
first impressions are what we need. It's good.
First impressions. I will say that I enjoy Maritain's writing better than Carlyle, but this is not a very high bar to set. He's still very wordy and dense, even if he's just doing a character study. But coming from outside of Catholicism, pretty much my entire life, and outside of Christianity as a whole, but I repeat myself, I was never really familiar with Luther. Like, going to Jewish school, this is not a guy that they're gonna ever teach you about. So I had heard some rumors. I've heard things here and there, like rumors that he was obsessed with scat, which apparently is not a rumor. So
yeah, he talked about a lot. He used the word shit a lot in all his writings.
Yeah,
a lot,
and it was part of his final words.
I didn't know that. That's news to me.
Yeah, if somebody can pull that up, Luther's final words, he pretty much said that he's a giant shit and it's time for the world to let him go. So, yeah, it was very enlightening to see that actually, yeah, this is exactly the guy Luther was, a neurotic maniac that struggled with his own inner demons and never came to terms with them. He really doesn't seem like a guy who priesthood was supposed to be his vocation to begin with.
No. Didn't Maritain cover that earlier? How Luther really he only joined the priesthood after almost dying in a storm. He almost drowned to death.
Almost after a friend's death, I believe, and then almost dying in a storm. It was both. It was both things.
So he kind of in fear fled to the church. Huh.
Maritain doesn't even necessarily question that he should have been in the church. He questions why he was saddled with so much responsibility at so young an age with the temper he had. Like, he should have probably been locked in a cloister. That's where it probably should have happened.
Like, he was talking about he was doing, like, how many masses a week? Then he was also with the University of Wittenberg. And he was dealing with the scheduling there.
I actually have this here because this was in a letter. I need 2 secretaries, he writes. I do practically nothing all day but write letters. I am preacher of a convent and the refectory. I am called daily to preach in the parish. I am director of studies and vicar of the district, and thereby 11-fold prior. I am responsible for the fish ponds at Leitzkau. I am agent at Torgau in the suit at Herzberg Parish Church. I give lectures on St. Paul. I am collecting notes on the Psalter. I rarely have time to recite my office and say Mass. That's a lot of responsibility for, like, what, 28 or something?
I thought the Germans were better at organizing than this.
No,
is that like a post-unification thing, or?
I think that was like a Bismarck putting order in the house sort of thing, maybe. And that just followed from there.
Well, let's pick up where we left off. I think we left off around here, 3, the individual and the person.
Yep, the individual and the person. Okay.
So let's just pick up from there. Anybody wants to comment on something? We'll just stop. Who's reading this? The Bodes or Ein? Which one of you guys are reading this?
I'm happy to start, and you guys just cut me off whenever there's things to talk about. If that works for everybody.
Sounds good to me.
Feel free to shut me up at any point. Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right.
The individual and the. Okay. Jay, you have the floor. What's that? Nothing. All right. Okay. Anyone but Jay can interrupt me. How about that? Let's have some kind of civilization here.
Some decorum.
Don't get me started on that phrase.
All right. Anyway, 6. What first impresses us in Luther's character is egocentrism. something much subtler, much deeper, and much more serious than egoism, a metaphysical egoism. Luther's self becomes practically the center of gravity of everything, especially in the spiritual order. And Luther's self is not only his passing quarrels and passions, it has a representative value. It is the self of the created being. It is incommunicable stuff of the human individual. The Reformation unbridled the human self in the spiritual and religious order, as the Renaissance, the hidden spirit of the Renaissance, unbridled the human self in the order of natural and sensible activities. After Luther decided to refuse obedience to the Pope and break with the communion of the Church, his self is henceforth supreme. Despite his interior agonies, which increased until the end, every external rule, every heteronomy, as Kant said, becomes then an intolerable insult to his Christian liberty. I do not admit, he writes in June 1522, that my doctrine can be judged by anyone, even by the angels. He who does not receive my doctrine cannot be saved. Luther's self, wrote Müller, was in his opinion the center around which all humanity should gravitate. He made himself the universal man in whom all should find their model. Let us make no bones about it. He put himself in the place of Jesus Christ. 7. As we have already noticed, Luther's doctrine is itself only the universalization of his self, a projection of his self into the world of eternal truths. From this point of view, what distinguishes the father of Protestantism from the other great heresiarchs is that they started first from a dogmatic error, from a false doctrinal view, whatever their psychological origins may have been. The cause of their heresies is a deviation of the intelligence, and their own fortunes only count insofar as they conditioned that deviation. It is quite different with Luther. What counts is his life, his history. Doctrine comes as an extra. Lutheranism is not a system worked out by Luther. It is the overflow of Luther's individuality. It will be the same with Rousseau. The procedure is essentially romantic. It is that which explains the Reformers' immense influence in the German people. That is why a Lutheran like Seeberg cannot contain his admiration of that truly daimonic man, as he calls him, at that colossal figure of the superhuman, which it is blasphemous to presume to judge. The question is whether every flood is beautiful and good of itself, and whether a river deserves our gratitude for simply spreading over the fields. If you're looking for the translation of this egocentrism into dogma, you will find it in some of the most noticeable characteristics of the Lutheran theology. What is the Lutheran dogma of the certainty of salvation but the transference to the human individual and his subjective state of that absolute assurance in the divine promises, which is formerly the privilege of the Church and her mission? Because God was her center, the Catholic soul needed to know nothing with perfect certainty except the mysteries of the faith and that God is love and is merciful. And if he sent her tokens of his love, she used these as experimental signs, less to probe herself and judge of her state before God than to live the imperfect certainties of hope with greater strength. Certainties all the dearer that the conscience dare hardly receive the confession of them. But without perfect certainty of her state of grace, the heretical soul could not exist without breaking for agony, because she's become the center and seeks her salvation in the justice with which she covers herself, not in the abyss of the mercies of another who made her.
So I want to comment on
Yeah, I would also like to comment.
this part here about the most notable characteristic of Lutheran theology is what Lutheran dogma is certainly salvation, but the transference of human individual in a subjective state. Lutheranism is entirely individually based and humanistic. I would say it is really because of humanism. And there are Protestants who want to like anyone here ever hear of Francis Schaeffer?
No. You've talked, only from you, Caleb.
Okay.
Only from you.
Well, he's very popular in Protestant circles, and so I wonder if everyone heard of him. He had a history. He had a series of a history of the early church, where he claimed that the Catholic Church was otherworldly because of its mass and its songs like Gregorian chants, but also was the creation of humanism because of the Pope and the man's positions of authority and like the priests and that kind of stuff. So therefore, creation of humanism came from the Catholic Church, but Luther fought back against the humanism of it and created a first non-humanistic philosophy and theology. How someone could say that reading anything about any of the solas is beyond me.
Yeah, it's a very crazy proposition. I mean, just to elaborate on this, because Martin has a great line earlier, that for Luther, the whole point of the church was to feel himself in a state of grace as if grace in itself were an object of sensation. And because Mariton now here is talking about how there is really, from Luther, no real Lutheran dogma, it's historically worked out by his successors and his disciples, it's all about the feeling of his life and about his own internal problems. It's not about a deviation of the intelligence as the other heresiarchs. Like, it's not an Arian heresy. It's not a Gnostic heresy, which is mostly a deviation of the intelligence with some, misanthropic feeling thrown into it for the Gnostics. For Luther, it's entirely a thing of the sensible soul, not of the intellect, which is a very interesting way to go about it. A man so consumed by his soul, probably more than almost anyone else in the world. Just look at the effect he had, if you want any proof of it.
Yeah, the egoism really is striking of all of it as well, because like when you read through the 95 Thesis, which thankfully none of us actually have to do because some other podcasts that we shall not name, and how much of it comes down to just what he doesn't like, therefore must be wrong, in the same way that what did he say earlier, that not even the angels can judge his doctrine? And
I'll find it. It's not even the angels. I do not admit that my doctrine can be judged by anyone, even by the angels. He who does not receive my doctrine cannot be saved.
And this is it. There's a lot of it. It's just interesting after Reformer Day, because through the reforms that went on, you can see where the schisms have been within the Protestants. Because if you take the Anglican Church and the reason that was created, and then you compare their troubles afterwards, and you see the strain of Luther's ego pervades almost every other form of Protestantism. Because you get into the Baptists of today, like a Pastor Stephen Anderson. And what's the first question he asks you? If you die tonight, are you sure you'll go to heaven?
Yep.
And everybody on the show will tell you no, and you can't be sure of that. But Luther's ego in that, because what was his big issue with the indulgences? Was it the fact that of purgatory as a whole that really troubled this man? Because he seemed to talk a lot. Like, his ego also reflects onto other people. He assumes this ego onto others, where somehow the Pope can take someone out of purgatory, which it's just this insanity. This ego of this man baffles me 500 something years later because of how pervasive, how much it feeds into that base human need to be self-centered. Because he takes all of his inner struggles and turns it into a religious movement just because he struggled with being horny. It had to grow into people like Steve Anderson existing and Joel Osteen existing and all that.
Yeah. And I was gonna say something, but it completely escaped me.
Yep.
Oh man.
I don't know about go ahead, Ancass.
Well, I was just going to say it's, and the point that Maritime keeps drawing back to, and something that I hadn't appreciated before reading this, is how much you can see that egoism and that and this is really the sort of the origin of feelings don't care about your facts in terms of any kind of modern cultural phenomenon. But you see that this is what sort of feeds Rousseau's ability to think himself good. And it's why we have it's why the idea of being spiritual but not religious can exist today.
Yes.
You have well, okay, that part of doctrine doesn't really sound good to me. I don't know if I like that, so I don't really have to pay attention to that, because it is all about everyone gets to sort of have their own universe in their head, and the world can either conform to it or not, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, and I think it's also the problem of certainty. He can't admit that because of his own ego that he can't have certainty. Whereas, you'll see Catholics say, I don't know if I'll go to heaven. I don't know if I'll make it. Like, I hope so. I hope everyone makes it, but I don't know. I just can't know. And again, he says, he who does not receive my doctrine cannot be saved, which is an even stronger claim than the church. Not that part, but the part that his doctrine cannot be judged by anyone, even by the angels, is a stronger claim than even the church makes. Because if the angels receive all of their knowledge just uniquely from God because of the way they're constituted, then surely they can judge the doctrine. It's just that we hope the doctrine is in accordance with God's knowledge. Like, surely God and his angels can judge the doctrine of the Catholic Church. It's just that we believe they judge it, good, that it is good.
And it's this bizarre inversion because, like we mentioned, his sort of the thing that starts leading him astray is that he stops feeling God's grace and he doesn't have that certainty anymore. And so he just sort of invents that certainty. Is he decides he feels strongly enough that now he can have this absolute certainty that's not based on anything outside of what's happening in his own head.
Mm-hmm. And grace isn't a sensible thing for the normal Catholic. It's not a thing you feel. It's a thing you receive, and hopefully it has a transformative power in you. But Luther denies this transformative power. He says you're completely sinful. It's a completely external thing to you. It's given. There's nothing to accept. You can't even, it's almost impossible even to accept it because of how debased you are. There's no cooperation with a divine grace as there is for the Catholic. There's no trying to do good works because good works are just beyond you for Luther. There is no acting in accordance with Christ's will because your will is irrevocably evil and tainted.
Isn't that similar to what Rousseau said about the noble savage and how Rousseau viewed himself? I'm kind of seeing a parallel between Rousseau and how he talks about of Rousseau.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the egocentrism of Rousseau, the unmoral incorruptibility, in the sense that Rousseau knows what's good in a sense, but he refuses to do it. And he's always in his own world instead of, living in the actual world. It's a very weird thing, but I need to reread the Rousseau section because it's been like a month.
Yeah. Yeah, I see the bill because what you end up with in the Lutheran doctrine is that because you can't receive grace, because grace can't actually act on you, is that you sort of don't need grace anymore. It's not as wholly external to you. It's now superfluous. It's unnecessary. Your salvation comes from something else besides receiving grace. So it really it loses. Not only does it stop being a thing, it stops being like you don't feel the loss in his doctrine because it's not something you could receive anyway. So there's nothing to strive for or to want.
Mm-hmm. Let's continue. Or any more comments?
Yeah.
If Luther were born 500 years later, he would have been a Sam Harris new atheist.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
considering his takes on scholasticism, probably.
Well,
it's just his personality because like you mentioned, if it's in an angel's constitution to only have knowledge as directly from God, this is not a unique being. This is a man who is misreading his own religion, which he has dedicated his life to the vocation of priesthood. He doesn't even understand simple things like there's no way to read an angel as some sort of being in between a human and God that has its own individual intellect. Like, it's always an agent of God in every sense, even in a sola scriptura sense. The angel always acts as an agent of God. It has no individual will and has no individual intellect. Yeah. So it's the only time that one is like theoretically Lucifer, and that's it. No, he would have been a new atheist. He can't read his own religion, right?
I feel like Max Stirner and Martin Luther both would have been like probably two of the most like egocentric persons.
Don't even bring up Max Stirner. Do not bring him up. Move on.
We're not talking about 19th century Germans, only 16th century ones.
God, they're all awful, aren't they?
Punch Max Stirner.
They're all awful. German ability to the Germans learning how to communicate ideas has been a disaster for mankind.
Yes.
The Germans are autistic and can make wonderful machines. They can make wonderful firearms, wonderful guns, decent beer, but they are a blight on humanity in every other regard, and nothing good has ever come from
lock
Germany.
Them in factories and make them work. That's it. They'll be happy. They will be happy. I promise you.
You could give them that.
Sake, don't let them make any synods in the Catholic Church, please.
that little childhood toy of fitting shapes in the shaped holes.
Yeah,
give that to Germans, really and you have a very functioning nation. Let them do anything else. They're not good. They're not good. Continue.
Let's continue.
So, why does the doctrine of salvation absorb all of Lutheran theology? If it be not because the human self has become in actual fact the chief preoccupation of that theology. For Luther, one question towers above all the rest: to escape the judicial wrath of the Almighty in spite of the invincible concupiscence which poisons our nature. The truth is that if it is essentially important that we should save ourselves, it is less to escape the devil than to see the face of God, and less to save our own being from the fire than for the love of him who we love more than ourselves. Domine ostende nobis patrum et sufficit nobis. Catholic theology is ordered to God, and it is, by that very fact, a science chiefly speculative. Lutheran theology is for the creature. That is why it aims above all at the practical end to be attained. Luther, who drives charity away and keeps servile fear, though he pretends not to, makes the science of divine things revolve around human corruption. Is not the salvation of man, however, the work of God and his Christ? Beware, in the Lutheran theology, grace is always wholly extrinsic to ourselves. Man is walled up in his nature and can never receive in himself the seeds of true participation in the divine life, nor, child of wrath as he is, can he produce a substantially supernatural act. A flavor of the devil mingles with everything he does. I say that whether it be in man or devil, the spiritual powers have been not only corrupted by sin, but absolutely destroyed, so that there is now nothing in them but a depraved reason and a will that is the enemy and opponent of God, whose only thought is war against God. True piety, piety of value in God's eyes, is found in works which are foreign to us, those of Christ, not in our own. Can then the act of justifying faith, if it comes from us, come also from God and from Christ acting in us? In fact, it is ourselves, and we alone, who catch at Christ's cloak to cover all our shame with it, and use that skill to leap from our sin onto Christ's justice, and hence to be as certain of possessing Christ's piety as we are of having our own bodies. The Pelagianism of despair. In fine, it is for man himself to work his own redemption in driving himself to a desperate truth in Christ. Human nature will only have to throw off as an empty theological accessory the cloak of a meaningless grace and turn its faith trust onto itself. And it will become that pleasant, liberated beast whose continual and infallible progress delights the universe today. And thus, in the person of Luther and in his doctrine, we are present, and that on the level of the spirit and the religious life at the advent of the self.
Mm-hmm. So, any comments?
I got completely lost during that. I don't know.
Perfect.
Yeah, Molotron's one good. I have to reread the same paragraph a few times because it's just it's not hard to follow.
It's the French prose. Like I love Maritain as a fantastic mind. He was writing in the wrong language.
The Juvenile has the exact same problem.
The German language is certainly better for conveying ideas. Like if Maritain had just written in German, I think it would be better prose.
Well, because the German language is made for autists.
Exactly.
I'm not sure, only because Maritain writes in the style of a continental, not an analytic. I think it's more a difference of style than language, because there are French analytics. I think Father Reginald, Reginald Lagrange? What was his name? Father
I have no idea who you're talking about, dude.
One of the more famous Thomists, Cahigu Lagrange, one of the more famous Thomists of the 20th century.
You know so many fucking people.
You just made up that name. That is not a real name.
Peter Abelard, Edith Stein. You just drop names.
He published like 90 books. He's one of the more prolific Thomists of the 20th century. Of course, I know him.
If they're not on Pints of the Quiet, I don't know who they are. Okay, that's like a new rule here.
I'll just say the French have a very flowery way of writing things, and it's not easy to translate things back from French to English because of the way they structure everything. It's just significantly more wordy. I guess for a Brasilia beep word like bulge, it's a little easier. But the Juvenile has the same problem. It is impossible to get through a single page of him without reading it 5 times.
Yeah, the Juvenile might have his own issues, but I think it's because Maritain's main mentor in philosophy before he converted to Catholicism, so before his mid-20s, was Henri Bergson, which was a French continental philosopher. I don't remember if he became Catholic or I think he converted as well, but I might be mistaking him with another thinker. But he was a continental philosopher, and he very much wrote in this style, but a bit less clear at times. I'm just used to reading.
What was his name?
Henry Bergson. I'll just say it in English instead of pretending I know French.
Yeah, because you said like Henri Bergson. Henri
Henri
Bergson.
Bergson. I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Yeah,
the
Henri
French language
Bergson.
sounds so nice.
Sometimes.
That's just
Nice
when
sounding language.
it doesn't come out of my mouth.
yeah, Caleb. If you spoke French, you would sound normal.
That's how it sounds to Jay. Everyone just sounds like they have a lisp.
Says if I say anything
Eh,
Italian in my
petit peu.
phone, if I say anything Italian in my phone gets it. If I say it in English, my speech to text does not work.
I just found out that Gahigul's Lagrange nicknames was the sacred monster of Thomism. That's a pretty cool nickname.
That is
I don't know who nicknamed him that.
I
but
that's a
damn.
good nickname.
That's a cool nickname. Okay.
Sacred
But yeah, he was one of the main, guys involved in the neo-Thomist movement of the 20th century.
Uh-oh,
At least-
Bergson failed the early life check.
Ooh, well, I'm looking at his face right now. That's not a surprise. I am. That's not at all. That's not shocking.
Oh, he was. Oh, dude, he was in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. No, his sister married the founder of it.
What is the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn?
Magic bullshit.
Some occultist bullcrap from the late 18th century. I think they may have been involved with. What's his stupid face? His name slips me now. Led Zeppelin bought his castle or his mansion. Crowley. Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, Crowley, that fucking weirdo.
Homosexual.
I mean, I knew that, but the way you said it.
The way that was delivered. Yep, weird guy. Homosexual.
Looking at Bergson's later life, by the way, it looks like he was planning on converting to Catholicism, but did not. He was thinking about it, but it doesn't look like he actually converted.
Uh-oh, he's in hell.
There's another like B letter, some other like French philosopher whose surname starts with B that did convert that Mahitan talks about. Anyway, should we continue?
Well, so
Yeah,
one
continue.
point I have, because I think it's relevant to what Jay was saying earlier, that if Luther was around now, he'd basically he'd be one of the new atheists. And just seeing like I'm not gonna be able to find the quote because I'm dumb and slow right now. But that he really sort of takes the humanity out of Christ in a lot of ways. Is when you separate grace from man, and you take the human role out of any participation in the divine life, you really sort of the incarnation just becomes that much more unbelievable and unrealistic and unattainable. So there's seeds of the disbelief in the incarnation that starts there. So I think it does very naturally lead to, as Protestantism has been seen to, does lead to a kind of atheism, because you've made this wall between God and man that Christ is a very natural bridge, but that you've inherently severed in your theology.
Yeah,
It's
he
funny,
says.
it's-
Yeah, go on, Jay. Oh, so he says, I think I'm not sure if this is exactly the quote, but he says the spiritual powers have not only been corrupted by sin, but absolutely destroyed, so that there is now nothing in them but a depraved reason and a will that is the enemy and opponent of God, whose only thought is war against God. Well, if that's true, then Christ wasn't perfect man; he was just perfect God. Just like that follows perfect naturally. There is no such thing as a perfect man. That's impossible. That's just definitionally out.
Yeah, there was no nature for him to perfect.
Yeah, he was a meat puppet, puppeted by God, which is, I think, some Protestants hold to that basically. That it was just like a meat puppet.
Man,
Jehovah's Witnesses.
You could throw any words together about human nature in Christ, and you'll find a Protestant who believes it.
But it is funny that he's almost Gnostic in the way he talks about these things, but he still somehow never ventures into that, because he's saying that the flesh has ruined the spirit, whereas Gnostics at least say that the flesh is evil, the spirit is good. He I don't know, it's just strange. It's like he takes Catholicism, mixes it with Gnosticism, and then marries a nun.
And then marries a nun, yeah. I think that might be the only condemnation I need, really.
Just a very strange guy. Like the way his inner demons just absolutely take him over, and he has no way of letting himself go and letting go of his ego. He thinks there must be something specifically wrong with humanity, something so awful that he could feel horny as a priest. Like, what was he expecting? Was he expecting to be perfect once he entered priesthood?
Yeah, he fights against the first impressions of the senses as if they're sins themselves.
Yeah.
Should have read his Abelard.
This is at the exact same time that priests are still getting caught in brothels and keeping their vocations, because like
one of them became a saint. In the
I was about to say, like Saint Alois. Like it's literally within his lifespan, or at least very soon after his lifespan. So it's like, yeah, Luther, sure, it would have been a sin, but you still could have gone to a brothel. Like you didn't. No one was expecting you to actually be perfect.
I mean, Saint Andrew Wouters, who was, fathered several bastard children, I believe, when he was, after the Reformation or Protestant revolt, when he was killed by Calvinists, and they said, well, if you declare the Pope a heretic and just say
no, that wasn't Wouters, that was Alois, I believe.
No, Wouters also did a thing, I believe.
Also, two of them killed by Calvinists for narcotic. And they both had
several martyrs.
So there we go. Several martyrs with bastard children as priests.
Yeah. Wouters' last words were, "Fornicator, I always was. Heretic, never." And so
now I think you're getting them mixed up.
I'm in the Wikipedia page for Andrew Wouters.
Is it?
Yep.
Huh.
There were several other martyrs as well, just in that small town.
I thought that one had a different name.
No, Andrew Wouters. He's one of my favorite saints just because of his last words.
Who has some pretty awesome last words. Him and St. Lawrence have like the coolest last words.
Yeah, turn me over. I'm done on this side.
What a great line. What sad. Okay, well, we'll get into my favorite part of this entire chapter. So if you're ready to continue.
Okay.
Hold up. Yep. Jay, what's you drinking?
Grols.
What?
Grols. It's a cheap Dutch Pilsner they export.
Oh, okay. Is it Hurls? As in Hurl?
Grols. No, Grols. Like a G in Dutch is a H. So Grols.
That's not the weird people.
You also sound very normal speaking Dutch.
You'd sound normal.
I actually, most of my ancestors are from Holland, so I think that's Dutch. I think that's close enough. I don't know
that is. Wow, an American knows his
similar.
geography.
I'm smarter than the average American. So there's that.
True.
Not saying much.
I'm smarter than the average bear. Yogi, we need to read Marathon, boo boo.
On that note,
let's continue.
On that note, dude.
But then, surely Luther's case shows us precisely one of the problems against which modern man fights in vain. It is the problem of individuality and personality. Look at the Kantian shriveled up in his autonomy, the Protestant tormented by a concern for his inward liberty, the Nietzschean himself giving himself curvature of the spine in his effort to jump beyond good and evil, the Freudian cultivating his complexes and sublimating his libido, the thinker preparing an unpublished conception of the world for the next philosophical congress, the surrealist hero throwing himself into a trance and plunging into the abyss of dreams, the disciple of Monsieur Guide viewing himself with gloomy enthusiasm in the mirror of his freedom. All those unhappy people are looking for their personalities, and contrary to the gospel promise, they knock and no man opens to them. They seek and they do not find.
Such a great paragraph before you go. That's such an amazing.
Fantastic.
It's so good.
Fuck Germany. Look at that list, man.
When Nietzsche giving himself curvature of his spine in his effort to jump beyond good and evil, the Kantian shriveled up in his autonomy, the Protestant tormented by concern for his inward liberty. That's so good.
So great.
That's perfect.
It's still not as good as when he does the chronology check on Descartes, but
that was the best part.
It's amazing.
So like, we're not going to talk about it. And then just describes it in great detail. It's just-
I'm not going to
So
talk about
great.
how fucking ugly he was and how misshapen his skull was. But now that I've said that, I'm moving on.
Oh, he's so good.
This is when the French prose works, is when he's just destroying
Yeah,
people.
when he's insulting people. It's when
It's
he's,
in the French nature.
Yeah, exactly.
If it wasn't for my Jewish upbringing and my French heritage, I wouldn't be as good as insulting people.
True.
That's very
Perfect.
true. That makes sense.
Okay. See with what religious pomp the modern world has proclaimed the sacred rights of the individual, and what a price it has paid for that proclamation. Yet was there ever a time when the individual was more completely ruled by the great anonymous powers of the state, of money, of opinion? What then is the mystery? There is no mystery in it. It is simply the modern world confounds two things which ancient wisdom had distinguished. It confounds individuality and personality. What does Christian philosophy tell us? It tells us that the person is a complete individual substance, intellectual in nature and master of its actions. Sui juris autonomous in the authentic sense of the word. And so the word person is reserved for substances which possess that divine thing, the spirit, and are in consequence, each by itself, a world above the whole bodily order, a spiritual and moral world, which strictly speaking is not a part of this universe, and whose secret is hidden even from the natural perception of the angels. The word person is reserved for substances which, choosing their end, are capable of themselves deciding on the means and of introducing series of new events into the universe by their liberty. For substances which can say after their kind, fiat, and it is so. And what makes their dignity, what makes their personality, is just exactly the subsistence of the spiritual and immortal soul and its supreme independence in regard to all fleeting imagery and all the machinery of sensible phenomena. And St. Thomas teaches that the word person signifies the noblest and highest thing in all nature. Persona significat id quod est perfectissimum in tota natura.
The most perfect thing in nature.
The word individual, on the contrary, is common to man and beast, to plant, microbe, and atom. And whilst personality rests on the subsistence of the human soul, a subsistence independent of the body and communicated to the body, which is sustained in being by the very subsistence of the soul, Thomist philosophy tells us that individuality as such is based on the peculiar needs of matter, the principle of individuation, because it is in the principle of division, because it requires to occupy a position and have a quantity by which that which is here will differ from that what is there. So that insofar as we are individuals, we are only a fragment of matter, a part of this universe, distinct, no doubt, but a part, to a point of that immense network of forces and influences, physical and cosmic, vegetative and animal, ethnic, atavistic, hereditary, economic, and historic, to whose laws we are subject. As individuals, we are subject to the stars. As persons, we rule them.
That is a great little segment.
Well, it gets better
Where he
coming up.
defines it.
He said ethnic.
I imagine he was thinking of Bergson as he wrote that. This one's for you, buddy. Should we continue, or do we comment here, or is there more, Caleb? 'Cause I don't remember.
There's more coming up on the individual stuff. I think.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, let's try and get, okay.
Okay.
9. What is modern individualism? A misunderstanding, a blunder, the exaltation of individuality camouflaged as personality, and the corresponding degradation of true personality. In the social order, the modern city sacrifices the person to the individual. It gives universal suffrage, equal rights, liberty of opinion to the individual, and delivers the person, isolated, naked, with no social framework to support and protect it, to all the devouring powers which threaten the soul's life, to the pitiless actions and reactions of conflicting interests and appetites, to the infinite demands of matter to manufacture and use, to all the greeds and all the wounds which every man has by nature. It adds incessant sensual stimuli and the countless hordes of all kinds of errors, sparkling and sharpened, to which it gives free circulation in the sky of intelligence. And it says to each of the poor children of men set in the midst of this turmoil, you are a free individual. Defend yourself, save yourself, all by yourself. It is a homicidal civilization.
True.
Moreover, if a state is to be built out of this dust of individuals, then, and most logically, as the individual as such is, as I have said, only a part, The individual will be completely annexed to the social whole, will no longer exist except for the city, and we shall see individualism culminate quite naturally in the monarchic tyranny of a Hobbes, the democratic tyranny of a Rousseau, or the tyranny of the providence state and the God state of a Hegel and his disciples.
We're definitely in the latter.
What was that?
We're definitely in the last one, the God state of Hegel. Yeah. Even Hegel couldn't imagine where our total state is today.
Yeah, no, but I love that entire. I hope that whole paragraph right here. It's a fantastic paragraph.
I remember this paragraph. I just thought it was in Descartes or Rousseau, because Rousseau he talks more about the political order.
Yeah, but it's in Maritain it's just fantastic when it comes up. I don't know, and the individual and person distinction is something I appreciate out of this. I think it's
I mean, the last line of the previous paragraph, you are a free individual, defend yourself, save yourself, all by yourself, and then it is a homicidal civilization. Just a blanket statement is also fantastic.
It is pretty great. He really is just fantastic. I mean, I say it every time we read him, but I'm just like, every time I read him, I'm just like shocked. Yeah, he's just fantastic.
He's really, really good.
Yeah.
So we move on.
Well, I'll say the discussion of what it is to be a person. It's dense in its Thomism.
Yes,
but it's so impressive that because again, I mean, I don't think it was him, but there was someone not too long before him. Like Thomism was virtually non-existent in the 19th century, early 20th century. Like it had almost completely vanished, and I mean, he clearly understands Thomism better than Luther did. Like he can understand the errors of Luther as articulated perfectly by Saint Thomas, without much of a Thomistic culture to have learned it from.
You know what's sad about that? Wasn't the Summa made for priests to learn from?
Yes, indeed it was, Jay. It was made as essentially a beginner's guide almost.
So, Luther, buddy, what happened?
Should have paid attention in classes. Stay in school, kids.
Just stop being so fucking horny, man. Luther was probably that one. Like, we all know that one kid who jerked off in class in middle school. We all know that one kid.
I was homeschooled, so I do not know that kid.
Oh, you were that kid then.
What? Such an unnecessary attack. The most unnecessary insult.
But so my point is that Luther was obviously this one guy who was too busy in his fucking robes just reaching under there. You know, he probably cut a little hole in there so it didn't look weird. And he's just there thinking about scat the whole time instead of focusing on the fucking Summa.
He wouldn't have been just a new atheist. He would have commissioned scat porn. We also forgot that part.
If Luther had a DeviantArt account.
Oh my God, I'm out. I'm getting some water.
The 95 postings of the DeviantArt account.
Oh God. Do you think we could find, like, if I looked up 95 theses furry art, what would I find?
Oh, 95 theses is so good. How did I not think of that?
Oh my God.
The 95 theses.
I'm so glad we invited Jay on for this.
95 theses.
Yeah, I think you've ended Bulge.
Every time a Protestant brings up the Luther, I'm just replying with 95 feces. That's all I'm saying. If I should have said that during Reformer Day or whatever the fuck it's called. I should have just posted that.
I'm trying to find. Apparently, so there are Catholic furries that have like subreddits and stuff, but I can't find Martin Luther as a furry.
Does that speak well or good of us? Of us Catholics? I don't know.
Well, it's like when the New York Post takes the Pope out of context. Like, in reality, we are welcoming to everybody. Even a degenerate like a furry can be saved. Even though I still believe there's about 3 biblical commandments that call for their death.
Well, so that they could be like, it's like the Catholic logic behind the death penalty is, okay, you know you're going to be killed, so you need to repent, you need to stop being a furry, and then we're going to execute you so you can be saved still.
You don't get executed until you repent, so they all do it on their deathbed.
I just love the canon we're making about Martin Luther here, that if he were a Zoomer, he'd be a new atheist, probably a communist, probably an ANCOM.
So
Extreme
Coomer.
Coomer, from what you said.
And Coomer, actually, an Coomer. Probably a Gooner.
So I found this.
Definitely a bird.
Oh!
Oh my God! Oh, Hail Mary, full of grace, Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for sinners now, at the hour of our death. Amen.
Amen.
I think we just lost every Lutheran follower I had. Sorry, Ryan. Ryan, I do apologize for that. Ryan
Bon
sees this.
voyage, Mr. Turnip.
You guys see his post? He said most Lutherans don't defend Luther unless it's Reformation Day, and I responded with
wow.
the reform.
So maybe it is a cult centered around a scat obsessed maniac.
Of all the things that started happening to us, JR, I did not imagine furry Martin Luther would come up. Like I think it's gonna get
I told you I'm the chaotic element.
Yeah, I pictured that. I did not picture that chaotic. I did not say going that route.
Just remember, the FBI just saw you look for that.
Yes, they did.
Let's see. As usual, Jay's being the subversive and encouraging Caleb to look up furry Martin Luther. He didn't do it himself.
That's in your search history now, brother.
Shit.
You didn't even go incognito.
No. Fuck it.
God sees it either way.
Imagine if you accidentally retweeted that as you were closing the tab.
You probably should retweet that. That'd be really funny on the timeline.
That would be pretty funny. Just a tweet from several years ago just popping up on my timeline.
Just quote tweet no cut. What now, Lutherans?
Just Meriton on Luther and just that picture.
I'm doing it. Hold on.
Oh my God.
A solid Luther, a solipsistic scat fetishist.
I hope we can. I hope we can get to the point where Marathon actually does start going into how horny Luther was. Because that I know. I'm just hoping we can get to that part because I don't know how far ahead that is now, but like that really was super striking.
He does it later on. Yeah, he does it a bit in the beginning. I think he does it later on as well. I don't remember.
He does it around like page 15, I think.
Okay.
So I'm loving the discussion. We're moving kind of slow. Do you just want me to try and knock out a chunk and we can?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Let's see where we can go.
I can read if you get tired too. So just go ahead.
I'm doing good.
No more furry Luther. We're speed running.
Okay. We're speed running. Go.
Okay. On the contrary, according to the principles of St. Thomas, it is because he is an individual of a species that man, having need of the help of his fellows to perfect his specific activity, is consequently an individual of the city, a member of society. And in this count, he is subordinated to the good of his city as to the good of the whole, the common good, which as such is more divine and therefore better deserving the love of each than his very own life. But it is a question of the destiny which belongs to a man as a person. The relation is inverse, and it is the human city which is subordinate to his destiny. If every human person is made directly as to his first and proper good for God, who is his ultimate end, and the distinct and common good of the entire universe, he ought not, therefore, on this count, in accordance with his law of charity, to prefer anything to himself save God. So much so that according as personality is realized in any being, to that extent does it become an independent whole and not part, whatever be its ties in the ground. Thus, the individual in each one of us, taken as an individual member of the city, exists for his city and ought at need to sacrifice his life for it, as for instance in a just war. But taken as a person whose destiny is God, the city exists for him, to wit, for the advancement of the moral and spiritual life and the access to divine goods, for that is the very end of personality, and it is only by virtue of this that the city has its common good. Thus, Christianity maintains and reinforces the moral framework and the hierarchies of the city, It has not denounced slavery as of itself contrary to the natural law, but it calls slave and master alike to the same supernatural destiny and the same communion of saints. It makes every soul in a state of grace the dwelling of the living God. It teaches us that unjust laws are no laws, and that the prince's commands must be disobeyed when it is contrary to God's command. It bases law and juridical relations not on free will and of individuals, but on justice towards persons. Let us say that the Christian city is as fundamentally anti-individualist as it is fundamentally personalist.
Yeah, fuck you, Thomas Jefferson.
This distinction between the individual and the person, when applied to the relations between man and the city, contains in the realm of metaphysical principles the solution of many social problems. If, on the one hand, and this explains the very essence of political life, if the common good of the city is quite different from the simple aggregate of the benefits pertaining to each individual, it is also different from the good pertaining to the whole taken by itself. It is, so to speak, a common good to the whole and the parts, and it must, in consequence, admit of redistribution to the latter, considered no longer merely as parts, but as things and as persons. On the other hand, and this concerns the end of political life, if the earthly and temporal perfection of the rational animal has its realization in the city, in itself better than the individual, yet the city is essentially bound to ensure that its members have the conditions of a sound moral life, a properly human life, and bound to pursue the temporal good which is its immediate object only with respect for its essential subordination to the spiritual and eternal good to which every human person is ordered. And since this spiritual and eternal good is in fact, by the Creator's grace, not the simple end of natural religion, but an essentially supernatural end, to enter by vision into the very joy of God, the human city fails in justice and sins against itself and its members if, when the truth is sufficiently proposed to it, it refuses to recognize him who is the way of beatitude. I want to stop really briefly, and we can hop back into it quick. But Jay's point about fuck you, Thomas Jefferson, if you can call it a point, I think and it's dense, but because again, like when Maritain decides to just switch over to like Thomistic metaphysics and deep diving into philosophy, like he doesn't. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think there is so much in that idea of what the relationship between man and society is that is so confused in the modern day.
Yes.
Is you have this tendency of the individual to be subordinate to the city, and then the sort of libertarian reaction where you have the individual being paramount over the city, and it's as Maritain points out here, and again he does it in not very many words and a lot of ideas, that that is misunderstanding the relationship entirely. That if we understand man as a person first and an individual second, if he is a person, the relationship between the person and the city is what solves a lot of these social dilemmas that we're still that the kind of the two sides that are fighting today in modern culture completely miss this point, because it just ends up being the individual versus the city as opposed to the interaction between the person and his society.
Yeah. Yeah, it's inherent. It is inherently disordered, and that's one of the aspects of the total state that we live under, where everything is ordered towards it and its dominion, as opposed to, say, an integralist state or the monarchies of before the Reformation, where things were ordered differently. Even the king had to submit. The Pope coronated kings and decided who was a king and who wasn't. There has been an obvious social decay that cannot be talked about in modern society, but it's not ordered, and it has its effects.
10. In the spiritual order, the distinction between individuality and personality is no less necessary. Father Gérard Lagrange has shown its bearing admirably. Man will be fully a person, a per se subsistens and a per se operans, only insofar as the life of reason and liberty dominates that of the senses and passions in him. Otherwise, he will remain like the animal, a simple individual, the slave of events and circumstances, always led by something else, incapable of guiding himself. He will be only a part, without being able to aspire to be a whole. To develop one's individuality is to live the egotistical life of the passions, to make oneself the center of everything, and end finally by being the slave of 1,000 passing goods which bring us a wretched momentary joy. Personality, on the contrary, increases as the soul rises above the sensible world and by intelligence and will binds itself more closely to what makes the life of the spirit. The philosophers have caught sight of it, but the saints especially have understood that the full development of our poor personality consists in losing it in some way in that of God, who alone possesses personality in the perfect sense of the word, for he alone is absolutely independent in his being and action. The personality of the wise is still very precarious and mingled. How much poor plaster there is on the Stoics' austere mask. The privileges of personality, the pure life of intelligence and liberty, the pure agility of the spirit, which is self-sufficient for action as for being, are so deeply buried in our case in the matter of our fleshly individuality that we can only free them by being ready to fall to earth and die there in order to bear divine fruit. And we shall only know our true face when we receive the white stone on which God has written our new name. Truly perfect personality is only found in saints. The saints have acquired, in a sense, have received by grace what God possesses by nature, independence of all created things, not only in regard to bodies, but even in regard to intelligences. The saints have their dominion, their glory, their victory, their brilliance, and have no need of carnal or intellectual dignities with which they have no relation, for they add nothing to them and take nothing from them. They are seen by God and the angels, not by bodies or curious minds. God suffices them. But did the saints not seek out to develop their personality? They found it without seeking, because they did not seek it, but God alone. They understood that their person, just insofar as it was person, insofar as it was free, was complete dependence on God, and that the inner control over our acts, which we cannot resign before man or angel, they must deliver into the bands of God, by whose spirit they must be moved in order to be his sons. They understood that God must become for them another self, closer to them than their own selves, that God is more themselves than themselves, because he is eminently selfhood. Then they sought to make themselves something of God, quid a day. I am fastened to the cross with Christ. Now I live, yet not I, but it is Christ who liveth in me. Although in the order of being they keep a self distinct from God's, in the order of operation, of knowledge and love, they have, so to say, substituted the divine self for their own, renouncing all personality or independence in regard to God, understanding that the firstborn among them, their eternal model, had no human personality, but the divine personality of the Word in whom his human nature subsisted. Such is the secret of our life as men, which the poor modern world does not know. We gain our soul only if we lose it. A total death is needed before we can find ourselves. And when we are utterly stripped, lost, torn out of ourselves, then all is ours who are Christ's, and Christ himself and God himself is our good.
That's a beautiful
Fucking
little segment.
hell.
That's awe-inspiring.
No, that is always that's what gives me shivers down my spine when I see
I
someone
got
that
chills.
fiery about it. It's just, yeah, there's nothing to actually comment on there. That is just beautiful writing right
It's
there. That is
impossible not to feel inspired by Mahitan when he's on a roll.
that's the stuff that makes you want to cry just because it's true. Give yourself up
so
entirely.
Beautiful. Yes.
Yeah,
Fuck.
absolutely.
And he writes it so convincingly, I have to believe he had some experience of it. Because he was thinking of suicide before he converted.
Yeah.
His wife had a death pact that if they didn't find meaning in 2 years, they were going to kill themselves. And
the most French romance.
French. Oh my god!
It is the most French romance, and it is so fucking beautiful.
And then
That
they both
convertibility
converted
is amazing.
I love the French. I love the French, dude.
Yeah, I
Me
do
too.
too.
Like
Despite
you said earlier, hating the French is part of the Boomer Truth regime.
Oh,
and you're
it
correct.
is.
Okay,
It
The
is
French
because
are pretty awesome.
they lost the World War. Yeah. And why is the World War your only fucking metric? The French have won like the most military battles and just wars in general out of every Western nation. And they're also they also understand the earthly pleasures, and they're historically Catholic nation.
Yes,
I got nothing else. I got nothing else, man.
The Anglos got kicked out of France by a peasant girl. The saint, but a peasant girl.
Yeah, exactly. A peasant girl who became a saint. Her conviction was not in vain.
I love Saint Joan. One of my favorite saints.
The French are amazing.
The English still, their middle finger is still just there to mess with the French. This is from the 100 Years' War. That's how deep the French run in Europe.
True. Very true. Shall we go on?
Thomism is pro-French. Sorry. Austro Thomism is pro-French people. I'll
For
claim
now.
that now. If you're not on
Saint
board,
Aquinas, Saint Thomas Aquinas taught in the University of Paris. So
True. We're also pro-Italian.
yes, we're
we're
pretty much
pro-Mediterranean.
We're
You're
pro-Europe.
You're
We're pro most of Europe, and we're kind of
Pro-Latin.
anti-America. Yeah.
Germany's
Sorry,
not
Paul,
really
we're
Anti-Germany,
anti-America.
anti-America, anti-England.
Look, I like St. John's.
Pro-Irish. But not the IRA
Anyway.
Irish, like real Irish.
Yes,
the
the
good
actual
Irish.
Catholic Irish.
Like I'm pretty sure the only guy still watching this is Matthew. You still watching? Kareem, that you? He'll comment something in there.
He's called Kareem.
I don't know what it's. I can't pronounce his actual name.
Kieran. Kareem is like Abdul Jabbar, dude. He's not black.
Okay? He's Irish. It's basically the same thing. Okay.
He's black.
Maybe-
It's fine. It's whatever.
He's
He,
basically
he
black.
gave us a pass. Remember? And
He's
just,
got one
Kareem
black
Abdul
friend.
O Jabbar Ali.
I've never heard his name actually pronounced. I've only read it.
And you just sort of like, but the letters you said aren't in the name that you read. Like what?
It's
like, well, I didn't recognize it, so I just guessed, like,
I
Philip.
speak a fake language called English. Okay, so give me a pass on that.
I do want to say though, Bulge has been slaughtering the French names because I saw who he was trying to refer to earlier, and it's not Jariju or anything. It's Garrigu. A G in French is a G.
oh,
Garrigu.
that's true. Oh, Gahigu. Oh, okay. I did.
And it's
say
not
Gahigu, just
Gahi. You do the R weird because you try to do it like an H. It's Gari.
Yeah, 'cause I'm doing a
Garrigu.
Portuguese one.
Yeah, Garrigu.
Because I learned a bit of French in school, but they never. I didn't care in school.
Yeah, you're
to
also
learn
you're
it.
doing like Mahitan, which is making me think like of a Mahi Mahi.
Yeah, I'm
and
not
a
trying to
mystic
pronounce
philosopher.
Marathon properly.
Mahitan.
Mahi Mahi.
I think we
That's
should-
my favorite aquatic philosopher.
I think Caleb and I should just go out on anglicizing every single name that we read and just as
Yes.
hard American
Just
as possible.
anglicize it. Just
Absolutely.
anglicize it.
Yeah.
Gary Jew.
Do we move on? Because he's back on Luther.
Let's move on.
Move on.
I do love like the just that tangent out of like it's so perfectly placed, but like just doesn't talk about Luther for like 2 pages and just moves your soul. Just
Yeah.
Oh.
breaks you.
Oh yeah, it's
For
gorgeous.
and then by the
great.
way, back to the heretic. Okay.
Yeah.
Alors, on y va.
hmm
Luther's history, like that of Jean Jacques, is a wonderful illustration of this doctrine. He
No,
did
I can't
not
pull
free
out the
human
gun on
personality.
Can't pull it.
He
out.
led it astray. What he did free was the material individuality, which we have just defined, the animal man. Cannot we see it in his own life? As he gets older, his energy becomes less and less a soul's energy and more the energy of a temperament. Driven by great desires and vehement longings, which fed on instinct and feeling, not on intelligence, possessed by his passions, loosing the tempest around him, breaking every obstacle and all external discipline, but having within him a heart full of contradictions and discordant cries, seeing life before Nietzsche as essentially tragic. Luther is the very type of modern individualism, the prototype of modern times, Fitch calls him. But in reality, his personality is disunited, ruined. There is much weakness of soul behind all his bluster. It is significant that to free the human being, he began by breaking the vows of religion and the joyful tidings, as Harnack calls it, which he announced to Christendom, at once spread an epidemic of despair over Germany. German Protestants would have us recognize the greatness of Luther, material greatness, quantitative greatness, animal greatness. Yes, we will grant that. And if you will, admire it. But truly human greatness, no. The confusion between these two kinds of greatness, or energy, between the individual and the person, is at the heart of Germanism. And it shows us why Germans conceive personality as a hurricane, a buffalo, or an elephant. It explains, too, why we see the old spring of the spirit of Luther gush out in all the great inspirers of Protestant Germany, such as Lessing and Fichte. Fichte calls Luther the German par excellence, and that is true insofar as the Reformation succeeded in separating Germany from Catholicism. Happy the nation whose supreme incarnation of her own genius is not a mere individuality of flesh, but a personality radiant with the Spirit of God. If we want to set against Luther's egocentrism an example of true personality, let us think of that miracle of simplicity and uprightness, of candor and wisdom, of humility and magnanimity, the loss of self in God, Joan of Arc.
This is the most jingoistic I think Mariton gets. Basically saying, "Look, we're better than the Germans."
And they are. He is. They are.
And they are. He's correct.
They are. Doesn't take a lot. Low bar.
Okay, so we've got to part 4 of the intelligence and the will. We've gone for an hour and 10 minutes. Do y'all want to keep going and try to wrap up this section, or do you want to call it quits?
I can keep going.
Everybody
If
good?
no one else.
I think I'm good for another chunk. Yeah, we can at least try and get to
Yeah,
through.
we can
part
do a few
4.
more paragraphs.
Let's keep
Yeah,
going.
Sure.
Shouldn't have scrolled down. Okay. 4. Intelligence and will. 12. Luther has another striking characteristic. He is a man wholly and systematically ruled by his affective and appetitive faculties. He is a man of will only, characterized chiefly by power in action. All historians insist upon his stark energy. Carlyle calls him a Christian Odin, a very Thor.
That's such a bizarre sentence,
Okay.
by the way.
I want to point out.
Christian
I read that line today, and that's when I realized, I gotta have Jay on for this. I don't know how, but in my mind, Carlisle and Jay are now associated. I can't read Carlisle without thinking
Because of
Jay's
my
podcast
vehement
on it.
hatred for Carlisle, it is astounding. Like, Bulge, we've talked for like hours in chat about how awful Carlisle is.
Yes, we
Like,
have.
every
I
few
cannot
weeks-
believe-
It just comes up.
It
every
pops
few
up.
weeks.
Yep.
Because he's so prominent in our sphere, and he's such number one, a terrible writer, number 2, a terrible thinker, and number 3, his only idea is literally something that anybody can get from opening up a history book. Oh, the great man theory, yeah, fucking great man theory. So what? Yeah, no shit. Oh, well, you're telling me that once in a fucking lifetime a great man comes up and changes the tides of history? Wow, I didn't know. I never sat through fucking history class in public education. Actually, no, I went to private school, but I never sat through a history class. Yeah, of course I did.
As
That's why
long as
I'm
your
here.
teacher is not a Marxist, you'll get it. You'll
I
get
actually
this.
think
theory.
I actually think my his last history teacher in Jewish school was a Catholic. So, but yeah, it's fucking Carlisle. I really appreciate how Mariton calls back to Carlisle always to just like shit on him, because
Yes.
Carlisle deserves it. He does not deserve the place he has today. There's nothing redeemable. His ideas are basic, and every idea he has that even borders on, like, the man makes up his entire thing on Luther on heroes, hero worship, and heroic in society. He uses his own definition of idolatry. He makes up his own definition of a common word that was used for thousands of years before him.
A very well-defined common word, mind you.
Yes.
With extreme amounts of doctrine and writings on it.
Like he doesn't even
Refuse to
accuse
discuss.
he doesn't even accuse Catholics of being idolaters for having icons. He accuses them of being idolaters for having ideas. Fucking Carlisle, and then Carlisle comes in as praising Luther for being the great priest of history, but a chapter before that, he's praising Dante. So what is different about the Catholic Church of Dante Alighieri that's different to the fucking Catholic Church of Martin Luther? Nothing. There's like 100-year gap between them, and indulgences are going on in Dante's time, and they're going on in Luther's time. So what is it, Carlisle? What is it? What is it about the Catholic Church that you hate so much that throughout your fucking book, you're talking about the Catholics to the point of the final chapter between Cromwell, may he rest in piss, fucking Cromwell, fucking burning in hell, I hope you burn well, and Napoleon. You know what's his gripe with Napoleon? That Napoleon forced the Pope to be at his coronation.
Yes, I remember
what
that.
makes
As a bending of the knee. He thought it was a bending of the knee, which is one of the most, like, I'm not sure it was completely a bending of the knee. I think that's more of a power move, in my opinion, but whatever.
Yeah! The Pope didn't want to be there! But no.
Not only that, the
it
Pope
does-
didn't coronate him. The Pope was just present. He put the crown on his own head. How the fuck is that a bending of the knee?
But no, because he had to go back. And this is the crazy thing. Carlisle wants to say he's not a progressive. He wants to say he's not a progressive, but then he thinks there's something wrong with the Ancien regime. That if there was an issue, then Napoleon had the Pope there. Because somehow papist is bad, but Dante good, but papist bad, but Dante good. Dante, who is writing Catholic fan fiction to please his deeply Catholic patrons in early Renaissance Italy or late medieval Italy. It's like, what are you on, you stupid fucking Scottish piece of shit? Your country's worse than Germany. It's worse. The last good Scot was James II and 7th.
This is exactly why I wanted Zay on for this.
Yeah, that was perfect. Clip that.
This is amazing. Thank you, Zay. Thank you. You can leave now. You're good. This is all I wanted you on for was a Carlisle rant. You're good.
I genuinely think it's just word cells that love Carlisle. I mean, you just look at the type of people. It's people. A certain rug merchant who was a Shakespeare scholar. It's kind of obvious.
But you know what? At least Rug Merchant has moved to Evola. But
Is
Carlisle,
that better or worse?
Because Moldbug,
It's
even
better.
though he's a programmer, he fucking did slam poetry, and that's a word.
Oh my God.
Have
have you ever
hold
seen
up, hold up.
photos of?
Curtis
Yes,
Yarvin
of
is
course.
slam. Curtis
Yes,
Yarvin is
yes,
slam
you can look
poetry?
it up. There's videos of it.
I'm going back to libertarianism.
Before
I'm
no.
sorry.
Before we
can't.
get too derailed, let's go back to maritime. We can talk about this later.
No, just one more thing about
Right,
Carlisle. One more thing. Not only does he make up his own definition of idolatry, he makes up his own words. I threw several parts from I threw like 2 sections of On Heroes into Microsoft Word, and he makes up words for words that already exist just because he doesn't like those words that already exist, so he has to make it his own words. I hate him.
That's extremely German. That's the most German 19th century German shit I've ever heard.
Oh my God.
That's the most Hegelian shit I've ever heard.
And
So-
he's gone.
He finished his rant and he left. He finished his rant.
I'm
and
still here. I'm still here.
Okay.
He
we
came,
move
he
on?
saw, he
Yeah.
conquered. He's ready to go.
We knew we di wiki.
Should we continue? Are we good?
Yeah, continue.
Let's continue.
Continue. I'm going to take a
Certainly-
bathroom break, but you continue.
Certainly, it is not a question here of the will considered in its most peculiarly human characteristics. That will, which is more vital as it roots itself more deeply in the spirituality of the intelligence. We are talking about the will in general, about what the ancients called in general the appetite, the concussible appetite, and especially the irascible appetite. It was said of him, his words are half battles. When he is let loose, nothing can stop him. We know the magnificent violence of his challenges. I should go to Worms, where there are as many devils there as tiles on the roof. I have seen and challenged innumerable devils. Duke George is not equal to a devil. If I had occasion to go to Leipzig, I should enter Leipzig on my horse. If it rained, Duke George 9 days running. With his extraordinary power of imagination and flow of words, he must have been a fascinating talker, a truculent orator, doubtless often coarse and base, but irresistible. Bossuet was very rightly remarked, there was a strength in his genius, vehemence in his speech, a lively and impetuous eloquence which carried crowds off their feet and enchanted them. Extraordinary boldness when he found himself supported and applauded, together with an air of authority which made his disciples tremble before him, so that they dared not contradict him in anything big or little. At the same time, he was exceptionally endowed with that richly orchestrated sensibility in which the deep symphony of unconscious powers vibrates, and which makes the poetic and glowing charm of the Gemüt. We have a host of his touches of familiarity, good fellowship, and kindness. Like Jean-Jacques, and no doubt more than Jean-Jacques, he was gifted by nature with a strong religious disposition. He prayed at length, and liked to pray aloud, with a great flow of words, which was the wonder of men. He was deeply moved at the sight of the harvest, the blue sky, a little bird which he watched in his garden. He wept over a violet found in the snow, which he could not revive. Obsessed by a deep melancholy, no doubt the greatest and most human thing in him, by that melancholy of Saul, which is so terrible to see, because if we did not know that Saul's eternal destiny, like Luther's, is reserved for the inscrutable judgment of God, we should be tempted to see in it the melancholy of those for whom it would have been better had they never been born. That man who unleashed the revolution on the world was soothed by music and took comfort in playing the flute. He tells us that the devils fled from his flute. All that comes from the same cause, the absolute predominance of feeling and appetite. If the force of instinct and the power of feeling is still ruled by the spirit, then it provides the human being with incomparable material and emotional wealth. And these very things are used for the life of the spirit. On this score, there's already a certain romanticism. If you like in such as Suso, but in the conception of life, which remains fundamentally rational, ordered, Catholic. With Luther, it is otherwise. The will has the primacy truly and absolutely. It is the very conception of life that is affected. We can say that he is the first great romantic. 13.
Yeah, this paragraph is good. Go on.
Okay. That attitude of soul would naturally go with a profound anti-intellectualism, which was besides helped by the alchemist and nominalist training in philosophy which Luther received. Let me quote here a few characteristic passages. Let us first hear him speak of Aristotle and St. Thomas. Aristotle is the godless bulwark of the papists. He is to theology what darkness is to light. His ethics is the worst enemy of grace. He is a rank philosopher, an urchin who must be put in the pigsty or donkey's stable, a shameless slanderer, a comedian, the most artful corrupter of minds. If he had not lived in flesh and bones, I should not scruple to take him for a devil. As for St. Thomas, he never understood a chapter of the Gospel or Aristotle. Luther, as he is fully entitled to do, that is, with the liberty of a Christian, rejects and abjures him. In short, it is impossible to reform the church if scholastic theology and philosophy are not torn out by the roots with canon law.
Where does he get off?
Right?
Yeah.
Motherfucker, I've heard your theses. You have the intellect of a worm. You have the intellect of a catty homosexual fucking griping about another man stealing his man. And you're over here saying that he never understood a chapter of the Gospel of Aristotle. Name the 4 causes, bitch boy.
I think we need Jay on more often just to make comments like that. Just every once in a while to pop in and be like, name something, bits boy. Just kind of do that number.
It is really just amazing to me because, like we mentioned, like the Summa would have still been just standard part of his formation as a priest. What was going on with religious education in Germany at this point that you could be ordained and not have any deeper understanding? Because Jay sort of was saying that he was probably like abusing himself in class to put it more charitably.
While he's like having to like. You said the dad that he can't even say it. You'd have to be like, well, he was abusing himself in class.
Well, that's correct.
I'm trying to.
Panky.
Yeah, there you go.
I need to put the.
He was making the beast with one back. I think this sort of goes to Jay's point about Carlyle, because we definitely want to talk more about Carlyle. But like there is something, and as Meriton points out, it's something kind of it's more bestial or animistic than any kind of human greatness. But there's a greatness in Luther. Like there's a reason that he was able to succeed in what he was trying to accomplish as well as he did, because there is something great in him, even intellectually at some level. It's obviously very confused, very disordered, completely absent any kind of true understanding. But there is a greatness in the way he's, it's because there is something great in him that he can fall so far and do such evil
damage.
Yeah.
to the world. I mean, Mariton says earlier in the first part, which we covered, that he has a great practical intellect, but almost nothing in the speculative. So he really can't bring things into harmony within his soul. But when it comes to, I'm going to do this thing, he's like, yeah, he gets that thing done. He knows how to do that thing.
but I say this completely earnestly. The German people are a people that can be driven to the emotion that they barely have with very simple and very brutish movements. Because look at their history of philosophers. It's not very impressive. And even to rejected art student, it's subject matter did matter, but the delivery isn't there because there's fire, but there's no distinction between a fire that warms and a fire that burns. Because take when Mariton is going on a tangent, he's talking about pretty much how there's no salvation outside of Christ and you have to give yourself up entirely. That's a fire that warms. That's the fire on a cold winter day that's in your fireplace. And you're enjoying the beauty of it. And it can burn you if you're not ready for it. But at the same time, this is not something that's going to harm you. There's a controlled aspect to the fury that is there in how he describes this. Someone like Luther is a forest fire. You might appreciate it from afar, but you get caught in it. And that's in the German Constitution, like that, not the Constitution of Germany, the Constitution of a German is to be caught up in shit like that.
You might even call him a Christian Odin, a very four.
Don't make me grab the gun.
You can't hit me all the way from there.
No, I'll shoot myself.
That's on
On
Caleb's
stream.
It'll be great for views.
So we got a comment here. Lucy was right, point by point. I asked for an example. He said,
Yeah, I'll just go with Jay.
He said, is he spelling schism wrong, or am I reading that wrong?
The sitcoms? Yeah. Luther did a lot of sitcoms.
I think we'll leave it at that.
I think that's a good stopping point.
Sure, that works.
Where we leave off at?
The Sorbonne. Last paragraph, page 15.
Page 15. Okay, good. That's a good stopping
point.
point.
That's a 100% advancement from page 700 and a little
Yeah,
bit.
that's a good stopping point. Jay, so you said once for coming on. Everybody, give your plugs. Yes, starting with Eincast. What are your plugs?
Let's see. At Einkath on Twitter. In theory, I still write things on my Substack, anarchocatholic.substack.com. That also get cross-posted to Austro Thomism. I've got an article I'm really excited about that I've been writing for about 4 months now, which is probably about a word a day on average, on materialism and idealism. And I'm excited to finish writing it and get it up there, but it hasn't happened yet.
Just ignore your kids. Okay, just ignore them.
Just ignore your kids.
Just ignore your kids and submit articles. Okay.
Yeah.
Name one writer that has paid attention to their children and succeeded. The secret is neglecting your children. Maybe even abusing them. Who knows?
I think Peter Gage did fairly well with 7 children, and he was a philosopher.
Yeah, but I'm sure his wife did all of it. And that's the thing.
His wife was also a philosopher who became more famous.
Yeah, but all the counterexamples for Jay would all be female writers. Like the ones that actually spent time with their children were like mothers of 30 and stuff. But yeah,
and there's maybe three. Yeah, there's 3 female writers to care about. So,
and 2 of them are nuns. So,
and let me see if I can name them: Edith Stein, Flannery O'Connor. I can't think of the one.
Saint Teresa.
I can't even. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that one, Bodes. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that.
Kareem? I think it's Kareem.
Kareem.
Yes, Kareem.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Saint Kareem Abdul-Jabbar of Luzerne.
Okay. Bodes, give your plugs.
I'm at available username on Twitter. I write for Austro Thomism, working on a new article, partly in response to Mr. Prudential's great video that you should watch called Everywhere at the End of the West. It's a short 10-minute video essay. Very, very good. You should go watch it. Just Everywhere at the End of the West on YouTube should return you that video. Working on an article elaborating on some points made in there and expanding. And that's about it.
So we try to get him on?
I'm not sure. Let me finish it first.
Okay.
See if it's actually any good. Because I
Is he
quite like
Catholic
Mr.
or
Prediction.
Orthodox? I can't tell.
Orthodox. He's Orthodox.
I don't
He's
want him on.
Orthodox, yeah.
I don't want him on.
He's very friendly with all the Catholics. I like
Listen,
him.
I love my
He's not
Orthodox brothers and sisters in Christ, but I can't talk to you fucks.
No, he's
can't.
fine. I promise you, he's fine.
I'm
If
sorry.
he
I
has a
just I
show with
can't.
Theo.
If you're not Matt
Catholic.
Erickson or Jason from 2-Bit Podcast, I don't want to talk to you.
Add the Prudentialist to your list.
I'll add
Yeah,
him to.
Prudentialist is
I should
I'll watch his
talk to him one of
podcast
these days.
once and see if I want to
Yeah.
add him.
Jay, if he won't have him on, you should have him on. Fuck it. You can invite him on. If Caleb won't do it.
Jay,
If someone gives me a fucking topic, I'll invite him on. But
okay,
Sure.
I'll think of something. I'll text you. I am the podcast matchmaker. I will text you something.
Geopol-
Jay,
yeah,
give your plugs.
you've matched made some bad podcasts, buddy.
I
Yeah,
gave you Connor.
plugs.
But
I
he
gave
has
you Connor.
match made them.
I gave
Hey,
you
it's great,
Connor.
we're
and That was
made.
a great episode.
He makes matches. He never promises the quality of the match.
Yeah,
Exactly.
the matches are made. Everything else is up to you.
You are welcome. It is not on my. It's
Yeah,
not on my part to perform the murder acts.
Yeah, find me on Twitter, _JQ. In fact, if you're listening to this, there's a very good chance I already sent you here, so you already know who I am. But regardless, you can also find my podcast, Cognitive Dissidence. That uploads maybe once a year. And my Substack, thejq.substack.com. That is J as in the name J.
You
I
even
maybe
post
post
on
there
that?
twice a year.
Okay, because I remember the last one was absolutely hilarious, but I haven't seen anything in a while.
I've posted several things that were not funny. I think the last thing I posted was a reflection on the America versus Europe debate, and before that, it was a
Yeah, I read
short
that one.
story. So
Yeah,
there was not something funny.
You're better
months.
when you're funny and not trying to be serious.
He's saying he didn't read your serious shit. That's
I don't
what
read
he's
it,
saying.
Zay.
Yeah,
I don't read
I
your
read
serious.
it, Jay. It was good.
I'm a better short story writer than anything. So
That is good. If you ever want to publish on Austro Thomism,
no.
no.
Yes.
We don't allow Zeus.
After
on
you're
the,
confirmed,
website.
maybe.
Yeah.
Listen, I will. So here's what's going to happen on Easter Sunday. Let's see, what is that going to be? 2024. I will walk out of the church. I will text you. I will show you photos of my baptism. And I will tell you, I'm still not writing for Austro Thomism.
Good. You don't.
That's
we don't
more
want to.
motivation for you to get baptized. Great.
Yes. Go get baptized, Jay. Okay, Austro Thomism on Twitter at Austro Thomism, AustroThomism.com at AustroThomism.com. Caleb Brown 549 on Twitter. We got a lot of good stuff coming out. Got Owen McIntyre coming on for Faith, Liberty, and Praxis. Hate that fucking name. I need to rename it. I need to rename it. I hate that title so much. I'm gonna ask Paper just to rename my show for me. We
How
got
about
a new
the Caleb
series.
Brown show?
No, fuck you. This brandy
That's
apparently
not
is
my
70 proof, and I did not know that when I was drinking like 5 glasses.
That is weak. That is very weak.
Yeah, but I also didn't eat
For
anything
brandy?
today. I ate nothing today. I fasted the entire day, and so it's just kind of hit.
Yeah.
Say
I
the N
suppose
word.
it
Say
was.
the N word right now.
Shut up,
Nick!
Jay. Shut up, Jay.
Immediately cuts.
I literally posted in the group chat, "Pray I don't say the N word." Okay. We got a new series coming out soon, starting November. We're gonna do a new Explaining Me Like I'm 5 of the Saints. We're gonna start with Friends of CC and move on to Saint Nicholas. The classics driven life is coming together nicely. So to have a episode on Leo Tolstoy's Deaths of Ivan Ilyich coming out soon.
Oh, hell yeah.
That one just takes so much prep work. I've had to read so much fucking Renee Zerard to get a good series of how to go about it. Follow us, listen to us, read us, all that good shit. Become Catholic, quit being loose when it's not a real religion. You're a heretic.
And next time we're going to have Jay back on to do a live reading of On Heroes, Hero Worship, and Heroic in History.
No. I'm not doing that to him.
It's for charity. It's for
Much as I
charity.
hate saying
Oh,
that,
listen.
I'm not doing it to him.
I will actually gladly do it just so I can rag on Carlisle for an hour and a half.
Listen, I want to cover something by Evola and get Haz on. Just to force him to read Evola to complain about it more. That's all I want. I want Haz to complain about Evola on air.
You could read orientations in like half an hour, like realistically.
I've tried reading Evola like 4 different times.
Just read orientations. It's literally 10 pages.
I am a
You
slow
cannot
reader.
not
It would
read it.
take me all day.
It's okay. It's you can just listen to AA reading. He has a stream where he does it.
I don't know what it is about his voice, but I hear it and I immediately want to turn off the stream.
Caleb hates British people, confirmed.
Yes.
Caleb is
Fair.
pro team Paul
First.
Fahrenheit, confirmed.
First,
I do like Paul.
second,
I like.
Iranian.
Okay, I know Paul is wrong and AA is right, but I like Paul more than AA.
That's a
What was I
take.
gonna
That's
say?
American populism for you.
And I'm friends with Paul, but that's a take.
I know. What was I gonna say? Oh, the graphic design guy for the website, Kato, was on an AA stream today. So everyone
He was,
go
yeah.
out. Fucking
I need
dubs
to watch that.
for Kato.
Well,
You
I
popped
do
into
want.
AA
Well,
stream.
I do want to shout Kato out for making it. I still do want to point out that anybody who listens to this probably already saw him on AA stream.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah,
but
probably.
still, I'm very happy for. I was
Still,
very
shout out
excited
the
when
boy.
this happened.
Shout out the
Yeah.
boy. He did a great fucking job.
Another
He did.
mutual of mine, but I don't think you guys know. I don't know if someone else made it, but he was invited at least.
Mm.
Another Brazilian mutual of mine.
Sage.
What else? What
Sage.
else?
I think it was Sage. Yeah, Sage.
There was
Oh.
Sage. Sage was on.
Yeah,
One
he's
of
also
the-
a
He
Catholic.
did.
One of
Yeah,
our writers.
Brazilian and so obviously a Catholic.
One of our writers, Connor Mortel, appeared on Zay's podcast recently to talk about Florida politics and a bunch of
Oh, I
other
should
stuff.
see
So
that.
Connor's Irish.
yeah, Connor's fantastic, even though he doesn't drink. That's a problem.
It is. It was very sad. It was very sad to learn.
Yeah, I'm
Very
almost
basic.
I'm about to kick him out. I'm about to kick him from the group chat. You know, he can't be a part of this.
Yeah.
Well,
I
listen
agree.
to them,
And I-
Connor. Stay strong.
But definitely, just check out Zay's podcast, Cognitive Dissidence. I listen to it whenever he does drop it, which is
Yeah.
supposedly on Source
Like once
Days.
a
I
month.
don't fucking know. And when it drops, I stop what I'm doing to listen because it's a great fucking podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah.
This week, I think I'm gonna talk about penis shit by myself. So let's see how that goes.
Fantastic. I was on there to do a live reading of the greatest Christian book ever written.
Yes.
You know, it is the greatest
yes.
book. It symbolizes all of Christology, Mariology, the Old Testament, the New Testament. I mean,
yeah.
it
I,
is
Which,
I
which
don't
part of the
think so
expanded
with
universe
that
is this?
huh?
Which part of the expanded universe is this?
It's the George Lucas wet dream. That's what it is. So yeah, definitely check out his podcast. It's fantastic.
Oh shit! Wait, that's not a joke, by the way. Has been interpreted variously as a Christian allegory for the life of Jesus. It's not a joke. I just looked that up.
Wait,
What the
is
hungry
it?
caterpillar?
Yeah,
what?
I'm not joking. I can send you the link right now.
Please
Send
send the link.
shit. What the
Send
fuck?
that link.
Were we on to something?
Were we?
I'm not joking. I can read the thing. He always stressed that the genesis of the book, which has been interpreted variously as a Christian allegory for the life of Jesus or a celebration of conspicuous capitalist consumption, came from absent-minded hole punching.
I don't even know what to say to that. Yeah,
I mean, that's just the thing. So either this guy saw your podcast and wrote this in let me see when this was written. I can't find the date. When was this? I don't know. Unknown date. So maybe he saw your podcast and decided to write it. Or maybe, someone before you guys decided that it was worthy of interpretation in that way.
okay.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Yeah, but Jay is floored by this.
I've
revelation.
come to talk to you again.
Oh my god. Okay. Yeah, fantastic podcast. Thanks everyone for coming on. Happy to be back. Y'all have,
See you in 3 months.
yeah, probably. You'll have a good night. God bless.